Hello, YouTube. I'm Michael DiBenigno. I have a little more time here. My TikToks are super fast, and so now I have a little bit more length to actually talk through a lot of this content and data, which I think is really valuable. What we're looking at is, with Thanksgiving just around the corner, there's risk assessment tools that look at what's the risk or the probability that I'm going to encounter someone that has an active COVID-19 case. And so the real takeaway, the first thing that sort of jumped out at me was this fact that, if you just randomly grabbed 10 people in the US, the probability that one of those people has an active COVID-19 case is 20%. And that sort of shocked me a little bit. And so when you think about going to a gathering of 10 people, those are the risks you're going to take. And that doesn't mean that you're automatically going to get infected. It has to do with the length and duration of exposure, where you are, all sorts of other factors. I'm not going to go too far into that. But I did want to highlight the model, because the model and what it showed, and this is a model that was developed by Georgia Tech, as well as some work with Stanford, and I'll have a link to that in the description so you can check it out for yourself. They actually go to a county level, which I think is really valuable as well. And what we're looking at here is the percentage, the probability that at least one person in that group of 10 has an active case of COVID-19. And so this ranges from upwards of 57% in North Dakota down to like 3% for Hawaii. So there's a pretty stark difference in terms of the regionality. And this is all based on, like I mentioned before, what are the active cases. And so what they do to calculate this is they look from all the different data sources on a county level as well as a state level, the number of confirmed cases over the last 10 days. And using the data from the last 10 days, they can then extrapolate out, they multiply by 5, or they also have a factor of 10 as well. In this case, we're showing the model for the factor of 5. So they multiply that number by 5, and that's the total number of active cases. And that multiplier is accounting for the undercounted number of infections. That's those that haven't been tested yet, those that are asymptomatic, all sorts of other things. So we can have a long discussion around if that's the right factor, or if it should even be greater. There is some argument that it should be more of a factor of 10 in more rural areas. But I'm going to stay away from that conversation and just sort of show this information on a state-by-state basis, because I think it's really interesting. And so the next thing I want to jump into is more of this model. And this is sort of this mental model to me of sort of how probability works. And if they're all independent events, right, that each person coming is another independent event, that we can think of the equation as 1 minus the probability that no one is infected, right, that no one has the disease. And so what that ends up looking like here is on the x-axis, what we're looking at is the number of people gathering at the same time, and on the y-axis is the probability that at least one person in the group has a confirmed COVID-19 case or an active COVID-19 case. And so what you can see here is that this increases, but it increases at a declining rate, especially as it approaches 100%. And if we look at it the other angle, and so what we're looking at on this angle, or on this axis, is the regional risk. So how risky is the region that you're a part of, right? That, whether you look at it from the US perspective, or the state, or the county, so if you're in North Dakota, as an example, you're, higher up on this percentage over here. And so the main thing to illustrate, besides this is illustrative, mind you, that is just the curve looks the same, right? As you're in a more risky area, keeping consistent or static the number of people at the gathering, that the probability that someone has COVID-19 in that group increases. And so when you combine these two, you create this beautiful structure, which I think is just, one, cool to look at, but it really, I think, instills in you sort of this mental model of how these two play together. And if you're assessing risk, in this instance, it's a factor of both your regional risk, so how risky of an area are you part of, but in addition, it's how many people are you inviting. So if you have a few people over and you're in a very low risk area, that risk is much lower than if you're in a high risk area inviting a lot of people. But I think it just becomes very apparent how easy it is to sort of overgeneralize, like, oh, there's a few more people, but each incremental person does add to that probability. And so it's, something to take into account. I feel like now is the time to, we haven't been seeing great things in the data, right, for the last couple weeks related to COVID in the US. And so I think that this hopefully is valuable information as we assess risk, especially before the Thanksgiving holiday, when traditionally we all are meeting in person and sharing a meal together. So thank you again for everyone's support, and hopefully this is helpful for people.